I can tell you with experience, Shivangi, by the way, that I've seen in surveys that in the verbatim, people are nowadays, this generation is nicely fearless. I've seen names of people in verbatim that I am giving you this feedback. This is what my problem is, and please help me solve it.
Hey everyone, welcome to the People Led Show. I'm your host Shivangi, and today I have with me the incredible Manjul Tilak. He's the CHRO for Financial Services and Realty at Piramal Enterprises Limited. Manjul has over 27 years of experience in the HR industry. He started his career working for Triveni Engineering before moving on to Kotak Mahindra Bank. At Piramal Enterprises, Manjul is directly responsible for shaping and driving people's agenda, while also addressing HR priorities at the enterprise level. Welcome, Manjul. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Shivangi. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, so Manjul, this is something that I ask all HR leaders, when we start off. What do you like beyond 9 to 5?
So typically, Shivangi, I'm a little bit into fitness. So running is one of the stress busters. We are a group of friends who kind of goes running on the weekends. The second stress buster I have is that we are a group of people who like to jam. We get together, jam. And there's a fairly active group that I am a part of. Which is into jamming, singing, etc. So these are the two stress busters for me.
All right. Manjul, as a CHRO for one of the biggest companies that I think everyone in the nation knows about, what are your 2 to 3 major responsibilities and your agenda points?
So I think, as the CHRO of Piramal Enterprises, my primary role is to make sure that we are not just present ready, but also future ready, and the future ready in terms of skills, but more important, the mindsets. Yeah. So making sure that, we are able to make sense of what is happening in the environment and, add a time horizon to it. I think these are, a couple of my priorities at this point in time.
So I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more on, getting the workforce future ready in terms of skill.
Yeah. So that Gen AI is kind of coming in, for example, in a big way, right? Now, one response to Gen AI could be that, there's a select few people who are, privy to what Gen AI can do, which is the data people, the product people, and the strategy people, for example. But I think the real, benefit of Gen AI will happen when people at the ground are sensitive and are fully aware of what Gen AI can do. That is where a lot of use cases will come in, and that is where and how the organizations will benefit. So I think one of the things that we are looking at in a big way is how Gen AI is going to be impacting the organizations going ahead.
Okay, I love that thought. What are some things that you focus on when it comes to your employee experience at Piramal Enterprises?
Okay. So what I tell my team is, Shivangi, that employee experience happens in two ways. Okay, it could happen in two ways. The one is the default way that something is happening by itself, and the second way is that you make it happen, right? And when you're talking about making it happen, I think that is when a conscious, concerted sort of an effort goes in to actually see how the employees are experiencing what you have to experience. Yeah. So I think one thing that companies need to focus on is how to make the employee experience happen rather than employee experience happening by default.
More of an active approach than like a latent approach that is
That's right.
already.
That is right.
Okay. Does that tie up into certain employee experience challenges that you've been facing in the last couple of years?
I think the two things that are defining the way employee experience should be happening are one, about hyper personalization. Yeah. So n is equal to 1. I think the big question that we are facing at this point in time, and that is something that we are trying to work towards, is how do we try to understand an employee, his or her requirements, and then cater our plans according to that the needs of that employee. I think that is one of the big things in employee experience that we will see in the times to come. And of course, the second part typically is on that the employee or the organization intends that the employee should be experiencing the various touch points in a particular way. But what is actually going on in the employees' minds? I think that is a question that we need an answer to. And the the minuter or the finer the answer that we get, or the nuances, if we are able to pick up on that particular question, I think we'll be able to do much better on employee experience.
That's very brilliantly said. I especially like the part where you said that, understanding your employees and, what is going on in their minds. So what is like in the last couple of years, what is actually happening? What's going on in the employees' mind?
So, Shivangi, I'd like to answer this question by taking, the examples of what the employees are nowadays exposed to. Most of our employees, are exposed to Swiggy. They are exposed to Zomato. They're exposed to Amazon. They're exposed to Flipkart. And when there's a particular customer experience that all these companies give our employees, why should we think that the employees are expecting anything less from their organizations? Yeah, so I think the big challenge for us right now is that employees are asking for things which are extremely user friendly. They are nudge based. They are giving them solutions, and they are telling them many other things. Yeah, so I think that is the expectations or the challenges that we are facing. In terms of the expectations of the employees from us.
Very interesting. I think this is one of those answers, a lot of people will be able to relate to. You mentioned that employees have changing expectations according to the things that they've been exposed to. But is there a difference in the kind of expectations different cohorts of employees have? Like, I'm specifically looking for what expectations the Gen Z employees have. Is there a difference?
Of course, I think they would look at convenience. They would look at, any information, not to go through reams of data. I think they have a pointed question and they want a pointed answer to that question. Yeah, so I think usability, convenience, they're getting the right sort of an answer there and then without wasting too much time. I think that is what the Gen Z is expecting out of organizations. I'm asking you a question about my leave policy. Don't direct me to the entire document that is expecting me to go through 6 pages of the document. Tell me, there's a specific query that I'm asking you. Please give me the answer to that specific query.
Is there a difference in that aspect of compensation that Gen Zs are wanting way differently than the other generations did?
I think so. If you were to look at the way Gen Zs would expect, for example, their compensation, they would need more disposable income in their hand. Mm-hmm. Right? They would believe less in some bit of a retirement sort of a solution. They think that they're a little too far from it. So therefore, please maximize what I can take home, so that I am able to put it to use the way I want to. I would like it to. Yeah. So I think there are these nuances, of course, generation wide. A more senior population, of course, they would look at not just what is going into PF. They might have a component of a voluntary PF, in which they can increase the size of their retirement fund. Yeah. So different strokes for different people.
I wanted to ask you, one very pointed question and your opinion on. I think this is a more opinion-based question. How do you define culture?
The way things get done in a place is what defines culture. At Piramal, I think we believe in a culture which is purpose-led. So which means that, our purpose is doing well and doing good, which means that, there's a strong linkage of our giving back to the society. But the clear understanding is that we'll be able to give back to the society if we as an organization are doing well. Right? Our values of knowledge, action, care, and impact, they are acting as beacons of how the employees are expected to behave in the organization.
That is great. And in so many years of your experience, where have you seen employee experience or culture, break the most? Like, what insights have you gained from those experiences?
So I think, employee experience breaks when, there are quick fix solutions that you are looking at, right? Without looking at, what the impacts on the downstream or the upstream of that process is. I'll give you a quick example. The company has a structured talent management program. I'm talking about any organization. And what, as a part of that talent management process, the organization decides that it's important for them to understand what the employee is thinking or what the employee is aspiring for. So therefore, there's a beautiful form that gets designed and it gets inserted in the system that the company is using. Now, the employee experience will break that, after 1 year, for example, when the employee is again sitting for that discussion, there is no access that employee has to, what the person mentioned the last time. Right. So, your intention was pretty good that you inserted a form, but did you think about how, over a period of time, the requirement of this form will still be applicable? Yeah, I think the employee experience breaks when you look at a solution in in your bid to solve a particular problem. But looking at connecting that thing in the future, I think is always going to be very important.
Shifting gears a little bit, Manjul, I want to go back to something that you had said earlier about knowing what's going on in your employee's head. How do you at Piramal Enterprises in your team keep in touch with what's happening with your employees?
So I think there are multiple platforms that we make use of. That includes employee pulse surveys, which are periodic in nature. There are, I think, the Piramal system uses the town hall mechanism very, very well, right? So the consistency with which, our leaders do a town hall, the amount of time they kind of, utilize or devote to actually understand from employees. That's on, of course, a large group format. There are other mechanisms that we have where leaders kind of interact with people with employees in smaller group format. And of course, there are cohort based programs like the new joinees interacting with the local leadership in a period, in a predetermined period of time, where they are able to express how their journey is kind of going on. So multiple platforms that are kind of existing in our scheme of things.
How do you build the kind of trust and ease, with the survey process so that people are able to share their most honest feedback with you?
Hmm. So I think, and this is something that I've seen over a period of time, Shivangi, that, getting feedback is one of the most important things, right? But what you do with that feedback and how you close loop with the employees, I think that is something that is the biggest determinant of how much trust people have in these kind of surveys. But, I think the most important thing is, getting that feedback and making sure that you're acting on that feedback. That is, something that really builds a lot of trust in people. Close looping with the employees on what we did as a part of that, as a result of the feedback that they gave to us. I think that's one of the most critical parts in doing a employee survey.
So, do you remember when an employee at some point shared some feedback with you and a prompt action was taken? Is there an experience that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yes. So here, Shivangi, I'll share an experience with you that this happened in one of my trips to the branches. Okay, so I happened to be at one of the branches, and one of the employees said that, sir, the next time you come here, you will not see me. So I was very curious to know the reason. So she says, and she has been working with us for the last about 5-6 years. And she said that I'm getting married. I'm moving to Jaipur, and this happened in Delhi, by the way. So I'm moving to Jaipur, and I will not be able to kind of continue. So I asked her the reason of why. So she said that I tried for a transfer, but in none of our branches in Jaipur, there is a vacancy. And I was a little perturbed. And I, of course, went back to my team and I checked with them. And unfortunately, they were actually, in the number of branches that we had, there was actually no vacancy. That kind of set us thinking. And we said that why not look at, our group companies. Okay. And luckily, after making a few phone calls, to the relevant people, we were able to place her, in one of our group companies in Jaipur. And you had a promoter for life. I think a person who's willing to kind of work was not getting an opportunity, and a couple of things that moved, and we were able to create that for her. I think we created a promoter for life in us as a brand. Yeah. And I think that set us thinking that, maybe in the group companies, we needed to have stronger, sort of bridges for our talent as well. So that was a learning. But I think, an immediate feedback resulted in some sort of a delight for the customer.
That right there is the definition of building trust. I'm so thankful for you to share this experience with us. Do you prefer like an anonymous feedback mechanism or like a confidentiality?
So I think, Shivangi, rather than splitting here on anonymity or confidentiality, I think, the trust that people should have is that, that the environment of the organization should be such that they should be able to express themselves freely. Right. And I think that, and the fact that, you've acted on that feedback and closed loop with the employees, I think that is a very, very formidable combination. I can tell you with experience, Shivangi, by the way, that I've seen in surveys that in the verbatim, people are nowadays, this generation is nicely fearless. I've seen names of people in verbatim that I am giving you this feedback. This is what my problem is, and please help me solve it. Right. So,
Oh, wow.
there was a generation that believed in anonymity, confidentiality, but, the generation that we are dealing with now, I think all full marks to them. They are fearless. They would, wear their heart on their sleeves, and they would express quite freely.
Wow. What are the action steps that you take once the feedback is received?
Right. So I think the regular steps that, once the survey results come in, you are analyzing them in order to reach an actionable, sort of a cohort. That cohort could be a function, that cohort could be a region, that cohort could be a business in a region. So I think a little bit of data churning to actually see what are those various things that we can do and on whom, right? Post that, I think there are two kinds of actions that are to be taken. One is an enterprise level organization. So for example, if there is a new policy that's required, a new policy on inclusion, a new policy on, let's say, a particular employee benefit, so that's an enterprise level action. And of course then there are actions which have to be taken at a local level, of driving, let's say, more leadership communication, or the other things that kind of come up. So the actions will typically be enterprise level actions and local level kind of actions that you need to take.
There is so much data that you probably deal with, right? Do you use an advanced technology like a GAI for looking at specifically at people data?
So there are a couple of use cases, Shivangi, that we are toying with right now.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say that we've been able to put that in practice, but I think yes, we're very actively looking at a couple of these kind of things at this point in time. We are hoping that the benefit of this should come to us in the next about 3 to 6 months.
Right. Are there like KPIs and people metrics that you actively look out and your team is reporting almost every single week about?
So typically, I think there is an action planning grid that we have set up, and the progress on those actions, is something that we monitor, and those actions could be, in terms of the number of, assume leadership communication meetings that have to happen, right? In which format they are supposed to happen. You talk about, if there is, a region saying that, maybe training hasn't really happened in that particular region. So what are those various actions that the team is taking? So there's a scorecard that we are trying to put in place and actively monitor.
I have come to understand that managers have become sort of the most important people in the organization when you talk about creating employee experience. Is there some active steps that you take to empower your middle management?
Yeah. So I think, one of the strongest messages that we are trying to send, Shivangi, is that, in any progressive organization where the managers have espoused the HR agenda, I think those are organizations which will kind of, make leaps and which will grow leaps and bounds. Wherever people would have left, the HR agenda to only HR folks, I think that is a place which is struggling right now and which will continue to struggle. Yeah. So which means that how do you bring the effectiveness and the capabilities of the managers up? I think this is one biggest, sort of a focus areas for us. So I think, first of all is, empowering them with data, right? So which means that, and it's a very basic sort of a thing that, if I have a team of people, what is the kind of data I'm able to give to the manager in their ability to nudge performance? What is it that I can do to the managers that the managers are actually talking about inputs and not just monitoring the output? Yeah. So I think, things like the ability of the managers to actually make sure that they are able to help the newcomers, the people on the ground, the whole sales process, for example, or the whole operating process, and are able to tell them what impacts that particular process. I think that wherewithal for the managers is very essential. And that is what we are trying to focus on. I think, diversity and inclusion. And, in Piramal, we're calling that whole, initiative as a DIBA. We've got a DIBA policy. So diversity, inclusion, belongingness, and accessibility. I think this kind of forms, our bedrock of how we want to make sure that there's inclusion in the organization. And yes, we are focusing at this time both in making sure that we are acquiring more women talent, but also making sure that the women talent that is there in the system right now stays with us and thrives.
So I want to ask you what 2 to 3 biggest challenges as an HR leader you're looking to solve throughout the year.
So I think the biggest challenge is that this whole environment is very disruptive, right? So you call it VUCA, yeah, but I think that the whole world is moving towards disruption. It started a year or two back, but I think how do you make sure that the top leadership as well as people, the last person on the ground, is more sensitive to it and is aware about how things will change for that particular individual. I think that is one of the largest, sort of, concern areas for which we need to, of course, find, a response to. The second bit is, of course, on, how do you make sure that you are able to, project yourself as an inclusive organization, right? And not just restricting yourself to only, certain cohorts like women or PWDs or, LGBT, etc. I think, the challenge for us is how do you kind of, make sure that there's awareness and appreciation of the diversity of thought, right? And I think the third thing will always be about the fact that, the new technologies, for example, a Gen AI is now coming in a big way. How soon are organizations able to get onto that bandwagon, right? So I think these couple of things I think is something that will keep a lot of HR people awake at nights.
Amazing. I think very precise, 2 to 3 points, very actionable. I think a lot of people are going to drive a lot of value in that. But my favorite is your second point, obviously. So I think we're almost coming to an end, Manjul. I just have one last question for you. If there's one piece of advice that you would like to give to people leaders across India, what would that be?
I think, and I'm sure, if they are CHROs of their organizations, they know their, they know the requirements of the organization. So I think, each organization, and I'm sure this is what they are all working towards, the understanding of the whole organization has to be sharp enough so that they are able to, give in, tailor-made and bespoke solutions for their problems. I think that's the only message.
Absolutely. I think some of the biggest challenges can be resolved with just understanding and keeping, in touch with the pulse of the employee, and then obviously taking steps in time. I love your wisdom on that, Manjul. Thank you so much for sharing these and coming on board.
Thank you for having me, Shivangi. I enjoyed the conversation.